Hello, welcome to Today in History. My name is Sotonye Afiasimana. It's 2nd of September. Let's roll the blinds back to the year. What does this look like? Fires everywhere. It must be the Great Fire of London. Yes, it is. So, on this day, the year, of course, was 1666. The Great Fire of London began accidentally, as these fires tend to begin, tend to be accidental, in the house of the King's baker. It burned for 4 days and destroyed a large part of the city, including Old St. Paul's Cathedral and about 13,000 houses. So that's a painting, a depiction of the Great Fire of London, which began on this day in the year 1666. Next is Horatio Herbert Kitchener, who are featured at least twice. I'll put a link to the video about him that will give you more information about who this guy was. But on this day, Anglo-Egyptian forces led by Major General Sir Horatio Herbert Kitchener defeated the Sudanese forces of the Mahdist leader ʿAbd in the Battle of Omdurman. So that happened on this day in 1898. So if you want to find out more about Herbert Kitchener, Horatio Herbert Kitchener, check out my video, which is going to be appearing at the top right hand corner of this video right now. Okay, let's move on to the next history making event for today. 1901 is the year, and this cartoon says it all, or does it? I'll tell you about what happened today. Theodore Roosevelt, American politician who was then the Republican vice presidential candidate, gave the first public speech in which he said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick. You will go far." So, as you can see, the big stick there looks like a baton, massive baton, and a caricature of Theodore Roosevelt with people on both sides of him. Europe, as you can see at the bottom, and possibly that's Africa or the Caribbean to the left of Theodore Roosevelt. The big stick policy later became a central feature of his presidency. Big stick ideology, big stick diplomacy, or big stick policy refers to U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt's foreign policy. And Roosevelt described his style of foreign policy as the exercise of intelligent forethought and of decisive action sufficiently far in advance of any likely crisis. Roosevelt, then governor of New York to Henry L. Sprague, he wrote in A Bout of Happiness after forcing New York's Republican Committee to pull support away from a corrupt financial advisor, "I've always been fond of the West African proverb, which is, speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far." So this proverb emanated from West Africa, is derived from West Africa. Obviously, he went on to be elected vice president later that year, and subsequently used the aphorism publicly in an address to the Minnesota State Fair entitled "National Duties" on this day in 1901. So essentially, speak softly and carry a big stick. Basically, be nice to people, but let them know that you're in charge. Let them know that you can be nasty. Essentially, that's what he's saying. let them know that you've got the power to silence them. I don't know whether that's a good thing, not necessarily, but I suppose it's nice to be nice to people, yes. It's nice to be nice to people. So even when people know that you have the power to control them, you also know that you have the power to control people. You don't use that power. You decide not to use that power unless it's absolutely necessary. So to some extent, yes, I agree with him. As long as you're not using it abusively, you're not using it to cause mayhem. But that may not have been his thinking at the time. But it's a smart way to get to people. So I agree with him in that respect. Okay, that's quite an interesting one. West African derived proverb. Okay, 1928. His name is Horace Silver. Pictured here, smiling, happy Horace Silver is an American jazz pianist, composer, and band leader who was an exemplary performer of what came to be called the hard bop style of the 1950s and 1960s. He was born on this day in 1928. 1945, USS Missouri. The Japanese surrender on this day, and that surrender was signed on this ship, the USS Missouri, on this day in 1945, bringing the Second World War to an end. Those who signed this agreement were the Japanese Foreign Minister Shigemitsu Mamoru and General Uematsu Yoshihiro. They signed Japan's formal surrender aboard the USS Missouri on this day in 1945. On the same day, Ho Chi Minh, pictured here, declared Vietnam independent from France. Interestingly, that's very interesting. Same day that the Second World War officially ended. I didn't think that anyone would have time for anything else on this day. But yeah, that's what happened on this day. Probably perfectly, purposefully or purposely timed. In the midst of all the confusion that was going on, decided to sneak this one in. Anyway, so he was a Vietnamese revolutionary and politician, served as Prime Minister of Vietnam from 1945 to 1955 and President from 1945 to 1969. Wow, so for 24 years he was President, he was Prime Minister for 10 years. Wow, practically spent his whole life leading his country. So if the name Ho Chi Minh rings a bell, resonates with you, the capital of Vietnam was named after him. It's called Ho Chi Minh City. 1948. What happened on this day? Christa McAuliffe. American teacher Christa Corrigan McAuliffe was chosen to be the first private citizen in space. She was born on this day in 1948. But for those of you who know your American history, you know that this lady sadly died with 6 other crew members when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after liftoff in 1986. So our hearts go out to her family today. Obviously, they'll be thinking of the mom, the wife, the daughter, possibly, well, I wouldn't say granddaughter because I don't expect that her grandparents would still be alive, but all those who knew and loved her as students would be remembering her today. So that's Christa McAuliffe, who was born on this day in 1948, sadly died when a Challenger space shuttle exploded after liftoff in 1986. Let's move on to the year 1952, and his name is Jimmy Connors. He's an American tennis player. Full name, James Scott Connors. So James, obviously, and Jimmy is short for James. He was born 1952, on this day, is a retired American world #1 tennis player who helped the top Association of Tennis Professionals, ATP, Association of Tennis Professionals, ranking for a then record 160 consecutive weeks from 1974 to 1977, and a career total of 268 weeks. Wow, so he was the top for 268 weeks. His name again is Jimmy Connors, who was born on this day in 1952. Happy birthday, Jimmy Connors, who is 68 today. 1965, Lennox Lewis was born. Who is Lennox Lewis? It's obvious from this picture who is. A British boxer. Full name, Lennox Claudius Lewis, CBE, Commander of the British Empire. So he was knighted by the Queen. He's a retired professional boxer, obviously born on this day, 1965. He would be 55 today. How time flies. He competed from the year 1989 to 2003. He is a 3-time world heavyweight champion, a 2-time lineal champion, and remains the last heavyweight to hold the undisputed title. So Lennox Lewis, born on this day in 1965. Just 365 days later, Salma Hayek was born. She's a Mexican-American actress, director, and producer. Salma Hayek Pinol is a Mexican and American film actress and producer who began her career in Mexico starring in the telenovela Teresa and starred in the film El Callejón de los Milagros, which translated to English means Miracle Alley, for which she was nominated for an Ariel Award. In 1991, Hayek moved to Hollywood and came to prominence with roles in films such as Desperado, which came out in 1995, From Dusk Till Dawn 1996, Wild Wild West, and Dogma, both in 1999. So that's Salma Hayek, born on this day in 1966. So happy birthday, Salma Hayek, who is 54 today. 1973, last but not least, J.R.R. Tolkien is his name. And if that name rings a bell, the name sounds familiar. Yes, he is an English writer who is best known for the inventive fantasies The Hobbit, which was published in 1937, and The Lord of the Rings, 1955. He served as the Rawlinson and Bosworth Professor of Anglo-Saxon and Fellow of Pembroke College, Oxford, from 1925 to 1945, and Merton Professor of English Language and Literature and Fellow of Merton College, Oxford, from 1945 to 1959. In 2008, the Times ranked him 6th on a list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. Forbes ranked him the 5th top earning dead celebrity in 2009. So that's J.R.R. Tolkien, who died on this day in 1973. On that note, we end today's edition of Today in History for the 2nd of September. Join me tomorrow for another edition of Today in History for the 3rd of September. My name again is Attorney Afiesi Mama. Do not forget to subscribe, like this video, share with your family and friends. When you subscribe, click the notification bell so that you receive updates of my video uploads. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I shall see you tomorrow for Today in History. Stay safe. Bye-bye.